Hi everyone. I'm making deviled eggs today. This is a tried and true recipe, a bit old-fashioned. As a matter of fact, I think it's my mother's recipe. So it's from many, many years ago, but they're delicious. They're always received well by friends when I make them. And I was invited to a neighborhood cocktail party this afternoon, and I said, I'll bring the deviled eggs. Also, I'm doing this specifically for Andrew and Grace because they enjoy them too, and I want them to know this recipe. But it's okay if you listen along too. So to start with, you have to have a perfectly cooked hard-boiled egg. I've got mine right here. And if I gave you instructions about how I made them, yours would come out totally differently. I'm convinced of it. I think that it really has a lot to do with your heat source, how hot your stove gets, how cold the eggs are when they go in the pan, how cold your water is when you put them over the eggs. There are a lot of variables. But I will tell you that Julia Child did quite an essay on hard-boiled eggs, and I believe it's in her cookbook, The Way to Cook. And she goes in and she gives a very detailed explanation about her best method. And although I believe anything Julia tells me, I do think that it depends on you specifically and how your equipment and your eggs will cook. So for me, what I have found is that I start eggs, large eggs, in a heavy pot that is covered with cold water, just cold water from the tap. It doesn't have to be any colder than that. I put it on the stove, turn it up to high, and bring it to a boil. I let them boil for 10 minutes. I take them off the heat, I drain the water, I pour in cold water and cover them thoroughly, and then I dump as much ice as I can get out of the freezer into the water and swirl it around so that water is very icy. And I'm convinced that that helps to separate the shell from the white. It stops the cooking. And from what I understand and from what I've read, it also prevents that very unpleasant dark ring around the egg. Mine come out pretty consistent. Don has a hard-boiled egg almost every morning for breakfast, so we always have them in the house. I make quite a few hard-boiled eggs, and this is my method that works best for me. There are egg cookers, there are little plastic eggs that you can put in the water that work great. I was gifted one recently, and it really does work terrifically well, but you have to find your own way. So we're going to make hard-boiled eggs, and then we're going to turn those eggs into deviled eggs. So here are my ingredients for deviled eggs, and also some of the equipment that I use, or the serving pieces, I should say. I've got quite a few here. I've got this lovely white dish with the indentations, and that makes a very pretty presentation. I've also got this wooden board with the egg indentations in it, and that's very nice for a more rustic presentation. Actually, for the Christmas holidays, it would look very pretty with some rosemary sprigs interlaced in here, and if you topped your deviled eggs off with something red, either pimento or some red caviar. But we'll talk about that in a little while. I've also have this, and I've used this on the counter just to hold whole eggs, but I think it'd be very cute with deviled eggs if you had a more casual table that you were setting. And then also I have this container, or this platter, I should say. And this I've had, it's well over 50 years old. My mother-in-law gave it to me many, many years ago. It's very cute. It has the indentations, and it comes with little salt and pepper shakers and its own little holder. So depending on how many eggs you're making and how you want them to be presented, the possibilities are endless. And there's nothing wrong with a round plate or square platter or anything like that. They're always pretty and they're always well received. So my ingredients, very simple. I've got Hellmann's mayonnaise, dry mustard, salt and pepper, and that's about it. Depending on what kind of heat you want to bring to the deviled egg, depends on how much of the dry mustard you put in. but I promise you they will be delicious when you're done. I'm going to peel the hard-boiled eggs now, and I usually run the egg under cold water to get off any shell fragments. And then after they're all done, I will slice them in half, remove the yolk and put that into a bowl and just set the whites aside for filling. Okay, I just had to stop for a second and show you. I sliced these eggs with a very sharp knife. I'm going to transfer the yolks into a bowl next to make my deviled egg mixture. But I just wanted to show you how perfect they are. Look at this one. There is not one bit of that grayish green ring around it. They are cooked perfectly. And I just want to point out, if you see in the center of this one, there's just that little dot. That is perfection in a hard-boiled egg. I'm very happy with these. The egg yolks have been properly mashed now using a fork, so there are as few large lumps as possible. I'm going to season this with some salt and pepper. I can't tell you how much because it depends on how many eggs you're making. So I'm going to start with some pepper. Looks like about 1/4 of a teaspoon here. And I've made, I think, 10 eggs. And now I'm going to put in some salt. Whether you like it or not, salt is what makes things taste good, or it brings out the flavor in food. So you're probably always going to add a little more salt than you think you should. Same is true for guacamole, by the way. But it does bring out the flavor. And now for the dry mustard. This also is just a ballpark. It just depends on how much dry mustard you want in your deviled eggs. It brings in the heat, and it also takes a while for it to develop. So even though you might taste it on your first taste, as the deviled egg sits, for about a half an hour, I suppose, in the refrigerator, that heat and flavor from the dry mustard comes through a little bit stronger. So I do want these to have a nice flavor to them. So I'm probably using a little, I don't know, it looks like about 1/2 teaspoon, maybe a little bit more than that. But I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to just get brave and put in a little bit more and mix this up, and then I'm going to add the mayonnaise and give it a taste. I've added the mayonnaise, and this mixture is very creamy. In fact, it's probably increased in volume a little bit. I've tasted it. Definitely does not need any more salt. The flavor of the eggs is definitely there, so I'm happy with that. There's enough pepper in here, and I think that I've added enough mayonnaise to make it creamy and smooth enough that it'll pipe through the piping bag that I'm going to use to make a pretty deviled egg. Now, I also wanted to mention regarding mayonnaise, to my friends who are south of the Mason-Dixon line, I know I said Hellmann's mayonnaise, but feel free to use Duke's because it is absolutely delicious, and I don't consider it a substitute. I just consider it a definite shoulder-to-shoulder equal to my favorite and my family's favorite, Hellmann's mayonnaise. Okay, I'm ready to stuff the deviled eggs. I've got a plastic pastry bag that I'm using. It's fitted with a rather large serrated tip, so it'll make a pretty decoration when I'm piping. And then I'm using a spatula to scoop out all of the deviled egg mixture and put it inside the bag. A little bit like gravity be your friend, and work to fill. Takes a minute. Patience is always your friend. But try to get every drop of deviled egg mixture out of the bowl so that you'll have nice, full, and plump, handsome devils. Coming along. There we go. I'm going to use the side of the bag to scrape off my spatula nicely. Lift this up. Fold up the edges of the pastry bag, you can see, and just let that egg mixture fall right down to the tip. Then you're going to twist to get any of the air out. And now I'm going to start filling the deviled eggs. Okay, it's time to start decorating these little beauties. And since it happens to be Christmas time right now, I'm going to do a few capers on some, and then paprika on the others. So I've got a red and green. If you had some red caviar and then capers, that would be delicious and wonderful. You could also use little pieces of red pimento if you wanted. But those are the only variations that I allow on my deviled eggs. And now I want to tell you about my little pet peeve. I'm going to put paprika, as I said, on about half of these eggs. But I'm not using the shaker. I'm going to put the paprika in my hand and then very carefully sprinkle it on the yolks only. Do not let the paprika fall on the whites. I don't allow it. It's just not pleasant to look at, in my opinion. And having the paprika just carefully sprinkled on the yolks gives you a much more professional look. And there you have it. These beautiful, handsome devils are ready to go to a Christmas party with their green capers and just a little bit of paprika sprinkled on the yolk. Enjoy your deviled eggs, and remember, the fork is always on the left.